What does it really mean to let justice roll down like a river? In today's episode of Lenses of Love, we're exploring how justice isn't just a concept, it's a way of life rooted in God's love. Together, we'll uncover why justice goes beyond rituals and words, transforming into meaningful action in our daily lives. When we see justice through God's lens, it becomes more than a challenge, it becomes possible. You don't want to miss this. Have you ever been in a situation where something just felt blatantly unfair? Maybe it was a small moment, like someone cutting in line or bending the rules of a game. Or perhaps it was something bigger, watching someone get opportunities you know they didn't earn, or seeing a loved one mistreated. That gut reaction, this isn't right, is something most of us can relate to. Deep down, we all have an innate sense that justice matters, that wrong should be made right, and that fairness isn't just ideal, it's essential. But here's the thing, justice gets a lot more complicated as we grow older. It's not just about fairness on the playground anymore. It's about systems, inequalities, and a world where injustice often seems overwhelming. And in those moments, many of us wonder, does God care about the injustices I see? Does he care about the unfairness I've experienced? The answer is yes. God cares deeply about justice. In fact, justice is a part of his very character. And when we look at the Bible, we see it over and over again. One of the clearest expressions of this is found in Amos chapter 5, verse 24, where God says, "Let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream." Now, I don't know about you, but that imagery is powerful. A rolling river, a never-failing stream, it's constant, cleansing, and transformative. It's the kind of justice that doesn't just trickle in and out of our lives, but flows continuously, reshaping everything in its path. This idea of justice as a river resonates far beyond the pages of Scripture. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of justice, he often used the same metaphor. Let justice roll down like waters, he would say, echoing the words of Amos. For the Black community, justice has never been an abstract concept. It's been a matter of survival, dignity, and hope. From the Underground Railroad to the Civil Rights Movement, from church basements to street protests, the pursuit of justice has flowed through generations like a mighty stream. Here's where Amos hits home. The prophet wasn't just calling out the injustices of his day, he was calling people back to God's heart. In Amos's time, people were going through the motions of religious rituals, offering sacrifices, and singing songs, but their lives weren't reflecting God's justice. And God wasn't having it. Through Amos, he said essentially, I don't want your empty rituals, I want your heart. I want your actions to flow from a place of love and righteousness. I want justice to roll down like a river. Justice, then, isn't something separate from our faith. It's an essential expression of it. It's not just about laws and systems, although those are important. It's about how we treat people in front of us. It's about how we live out God's love in real, tangible ways. After this short break, we're going to dive deeper into what justice and love have to do with God's character. We'll be right back.
Hello, good to see you today here at the Lenses of Love set. I love to watch Sam's message and learn from him how to see God and His Word through the lenses of love. Perhaps you would like to learn more about other questions of life. For example, why am I here? Is there a God? Why is there so much evil and suffering? And why are there so many different religions, and which one is true? Is the Bible fact or fiction? Who is Jesus of Nazareth? Was he truly God as Christians say he is? Why did Jesus come to earth to die? And how does his death offer us salvation? What happens when I die? Is there really a heaven or a hell? These questions and others we answer on our online Bible study platform at hopestudy.ca. There, you will find answers to these and other crucial life questions. We would love to hear from you. Please email us at hopestudy@hopetv.ca. And remember, there is hope and answers to life's biggest questions in the Word of God.
When we hear the word justice, it can stir up a mix of emotions. For some, it might bring to mind a courtroom scene or images of people holding signs and chanting for change. For others, it might feel heavy, even overwhelming, because justice so often feels like an uphill battle. But here's the thing, God's justice isn't rooted in our flawed human systems. It's not about punishment or revenge. God's justice is rooted in love. You see, love and justice are not opposites. They're deeply intertwined in God's character. Justice isn't something God does, it's who He is. And because of that, it's not harsh or detached, it's compassionate, restorative, and deeply personal. When God calls us to pursue justice, He's inviting us to reflect His love in the way we live, the way we treat others, and the way we respond to the brokenness we see around us. Let's go back to Amos chapter 5, verse 24. Rivers don't trickle timidly or run out of steam after a little rain. They move with power and purpose, carving paths, nourishing life, and shaping the world around them. That's the kind of justice God is talking about. Justice that flows consistently and transforms everything it touches. And here's the key, that kind of justice can only come from love. It's like you're walking through a desert, parched and desperate for water. You come across a stream that's dried up, leaving only cracked earth behind. That's what justice without love looks like. It's empty, unsatisfying, and unable to bring life. But when justice flows from love, it's like coming across a vibrant, rushing river in the middle of that desert. It refreshes, restores, and sustains. That's the justice God calls us to be a part of, a justice that's fueled by His love for humanity. Have you ever felt a deep sense of unfairness? Maybe you saw someone being mistreated or excluded. Maybe you noticed a system that seemed to favor a few while neglecting others. That gut feeling of this isn't right is often the spark of God's justice stirring within you. But here's where love comes in. Without love, we can respond to injustice with anger, bitterness, and even apathy. We might think, this isn't my problem, or I can't fix this, so why bother? But when love is your motivation, we see things differently. Love compels us to act, not out of guilt or obligation, but out of compassion. When we see injustice through God's lenses of love, we don't just see problems to fix, we see people to care for. We see the vulnerable, the overlooked, and the mistreated as individuals made in the image of God, deeply valued and worthy of dignity. Take the story of the Good Samaritan in Luke chapter 10. Here's a man who saw someone in need, someone beaten and left for dead on the side of the road. He could have walked away like others did, but he chose to stop. He chose to care. Why? Because love moved him to act. The Samaritan didn't just bandage the man's wounds and leave him there. He went above and beyond, ensuring the man was cared for and restored. That's what justice rooted in love looks like. Now, I know what you might be thinking. That's great in theory, but what can I actually do? The truth is, justice doesn't have to start with grand gestures or big initiatives. It starts with the little things, how we treat the people around us, how we respond to the needs we see, how we choose to engage rather than ignore. It's in the way you speak up when someone makes a hurtful comment, even if it feels uncomfortable. It's in the way you take time to listen to someone who's hurting, even when you're busy. It's in the way you use your resources, whether that's your time, your money, your voice, to support those who are struggling. God's justice isn't about fixing everything overnight. It's about being faithful with what's in front of you. And here's the incredible part. When you choose to act out of love, no matter how small the action seems, you become part of that rolling river of justice that Amos is talking about. Justice rooted in love also challenges us to examine our own hearts. Are there biases we need to confront? Are there times we've stayed silent when we should have spoken up? Are there ways we can better reflect God's love in our daily lives? These aren't easy questions, but they're necessary if we want to align ourselves with God's heart. Remember, God's justice isn't about perfection, it's about participation. He doesn't expect us to have all the answers or solve every problem. He simply asks us to show up, to care, and to act. And as we do, we begin to see the world not as a hopeless mess, but as a place where God's love and justice are actively at work, bringing hope and healing. Let's be honest with ourselves for a bit. Religion is often where we go to feel like we're doing enough. We show up to church, sing the songs, serve in ministry, and check the boxes that make us feel like good, faithful Christians. But Amos chapter 5 confronts us with a hard truth. God isn't impressed by religious performance. Justice, true justice, isn't about the rituals we perform, it's about the lives we live. In Amos chapter 5, verses 21 to 24, God delivers a sobering message to his people. He says, I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Away with the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps, but let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. Imagine hearing that. God is essentially saying, your religious acts mean nothing to me if they're not backed by the lives of justice and righteousness. See, the people of Israel weren't neglecting religion. They were showing up to the temple. They were offering sacrifices. They were singing worship songs. They looked the part, but their hearts were far from God's. Outside the temple, they were ignoring the poor, exploiting the vulnerable, and allowing systems of oppression to flourish. They were going through the motions of religion without embodying the heart of God. Doesn't this feel uncomfortably familiar? How often do we settle for looking faithful while neglecting the inward transformation that God desires? We might say all the right things, sing all the right songs, and show up at all the right places, but if we're not pursuing justice in our daily lives, we're missing the point. This is where Amos shakes us awake. He reminds us that justice isn't a side project for those who call themselves Christians. It's central to their faith. Jesus echoed this same sentiment in Matthew, where he called out the Pharisees saying, "For you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income of your herb gardens, but you ignore the more important aspects of the law, justice, mercy, and faith." The Pharisees were meticulous about following religious rules, but they had forgotten the heart of those rules, to love God and to love others. Think about how easy it is to fall into the trap of religious activity. Maybe you found yourself serving in every ministry, attending every Bible study, and volunteering at every event, but still feeling like something is missing. That's because justice, mercy, and faithfulness aren't about how busy we are for God. They're about how we reflect His character in the world. Imagine a church that has a beautiful service, complete with incredible music, dynamic preaching, and an engaged congregation. But what if that same church ignores the struggling families in their community? What if they never address the injustice happening right outside their doors? Wouldn't something feel off? That's exactly what Amos is addressing. God doesn't want our worship to be a performance. He wants it to overflow into lives of love, service, and justice. So what does this look like practically? I'll tell you right after this short break.
Hello friends, it is great to be here with you on Lenses of Love today. I trust that you've been blessed by this program, and I hope that you're able to share it with your loved ones. Thank you for your support so far. It means the world to us, really. And if you want to help us, if you haven't already partnered with us as an agent of hope, I briefly wanted to share with you how to do so. Above all, we desire your prayers. Please remember those who are involved with Hope Channel Canada and the production of its programs, as well as the different initiatives that we'll be launching throughout the country. I also ask your prayers for the hearts of people all across Canada, that they will be open to learning that in Jesus there is more to life. Anytime you have to spare in order to volunteer with one of our projects will be greatly appreciated. Please feel free to contact us at either agentsofhope@hopetv.ca or visit agentsofhope.ca to have your questions answered and to learn where you can be of service. And finally, your financial support would be greatly appreciated, and any amount makes a huge difference in impacting Canadians all across our nation. Please visit agentsofhope.ca so that you can donate online via debit, credit, Google Pay, or Apple Pay to make a one-time or recurring donation. If you prefer to donate offline, you can e-transfer us at agentsofhope@hopetv.ca or mail a check to Hope Channel Canada at the following address: Hope Channel Canada, 1148 King Street East, Oshawa, Ontario, L1H1H8. Thank you once again for joining us on this exciting journey.
So what does it look like to have our worship overflow through our actions? It starts with asking ourselves some tough questions. When we see someone in need, do we act or do we assume it's someone else's responsibility? When we encounter injustice, do we speak up or do we stay silent to avoid conflict? When we think about our faith, is it centered on loving God and loving others, or is it more about checking off boxes to feel like we're doing enough? Justice requires more than religion, because religion without justice is empty. It's like a riverbed without water. It's dry, it's lifeless, it's incapable of sustaining life. But when justice flows like a river, it nourishes and transforms everything in its path. That's what God desires from us. Not just songs, not just church services, but lives that reflect His love and pursue His justice. This doesn't mean we ditch religious practices. They have their place. Worship, prayer, and fellowship, they're all vital to our spiritual growth, but they should be the fuel that drives us to live out God's heart for justice. Our worship should inspire us to care for the oppressed. Our prayers should move us to action, and our fellowship should challenge us to love our neighbors more deeply. At the end of the day, justice isn't something we can outsource or delegate. It's not a task for someone else to handle. It's a calling for every follower of Christ. And when we embrace this calling, our faith comes alive in ways that mere rituals never could. Justice becomes not just something we do, but a reflection of who we are as people transformed by God's love. God's message through Amos is clear. He doesn't want empty religion. He wants lives that embody His love and reflect His justice. It's not about how we appear in church once a week or twice a week. It's about how we live every other day of the week. So let's ask ourselves, are we letting justice roll through our lives, or are we simply going through the motions? Because God isn't looking for a checklist of religious activities. He's looking for hearts that love Him and love others. Amos 5:24 paints a vivid picture. Let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. This isn't just a command for a specific moment in time. It's a call to embody justice as a continual life-giving flow. A river doesn't pause or stop. It keeps moving, carving out paths, and nourishes everything around it. God invites us to do the same thing. When we think of justice, it's tempting to associate it with monumental events, marches, legal battles, or sweeping reforms. And while those things are certainly important, the kind of justice Amos describes starts in the everyday moments. Justice isn't about waiting for a grand opportunity to make a difference. It's about integrating fairness, compassion, and love into the fabric of our daily lives. Think about how a river flows. It might start as a small stream, but as it continues, it gains strength, power, and momentum. Similarly, small acts of justice, choosing to speak kindly to someone who's been overlooked, offering a helping hand without expecting anything in return, or standing up for a coworker who's been treated unfairly, add up. They create ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. Amos challenges us to live in a way where justice isn't an occasional act, but a constant flow. Are we treating people with fairness and dignity in our daily interactions? Are we listening to the needs of those around us and responding with generosity and grace? Justice as a way of life means being intentional in how we move through the world, making choices that reflect God's love and character. A river also reminds us of connection. A river doesn't exist in isolation. It shapes and is shaped by the landscape around it. In the same way, living a life of justice involves being deeply connected to the people and communities around us. Amos was speaking to a society that had become self-centered, where the wealthy and the powerful exploited the vulnerable. God's rebuke through Amos wasn't just for individual feelings, it was a call to collective transformation. Today, as we face similar challenges, it's easy to become so focused on our own lives that we miss the needs of our neighbors. But living out Amos 5:24 means looking beyond ourselves. It's about asking questions like, are my actions contributing to the well-being of others? Am I aware of the injustices happening in my community? And if so, what can I do about them? Justice in community might look like mentoring a young person who needs guidance, supporting a local food pantry, or advocating for policies that protect the vulnerable. It's about recognizing that our faith isn't just personal, it's relational. God's call to let justice roll on like a river isn't just for our own benefit, it's meant to bring life and renewal to those around us. One of the most striking aspects of Amos's imagery is the idea of a never-failing stream. Streams don't take days off. They don't stop flowing when it's inconvenient. Justice as a way of life requires that same consistency. It's not about sporadic bursts of action when we feel inspired. It's about making justice a defining characteristic of who we are. This kind of consistency can be challenging. There will be times when doing the right thing feels exhausting, when speaking up seems risky, or when we wonder if our small efforts are making any difference. But Amos reminds us that justice isn't dependent on our own feelings or circumstances. It's rooted in God's character. And because God is the source, we can draw strength from Him to keep going even when it's hard. Ultimately, this verse invites us to align our lives with God's vision for the world. A river doesn't choose its path. It follows the course set for it by its source. Similarly, living a life of justice means surrendering to God's direction, trusting that His way leads to life, restoration, and renewal. What if we all took this call seriously? If justice truly became a way of life, flowing through our homes, workplaces, and our communities, what kind of world would we create? Amos challenges us to dream bigger, to see justice not as a destination, but as a journey, a continuous act of living out God's love in transformative ways. As Amos speaks, it's clear that justice isn't separate from worship. It's an extension of it. God isn't impressed by religious rituals if they're disconnected from how we treat others. Worship isn't just about the songs we sing, the prayers we offer, or the services we attend. It's about the way those expressions of devotion transforms our daily lives. Our worship becomes authentic when it overflows into acts of love, fairness, and compassion. Justice is worship in action. It's how we honor God by reflecting His heart in the way we live. When we stand for the oppressed, care for the marginalized, and treat others with dignity, we are declaring God's worth in tangible ways. True worship isn't confined to a sanctuary. It flows like a river into the streets, workplaces, and relationships around us, carrying the love and justice of God wherever it goes. As we close, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've explored today. Amos calls us to let justice roll on like a river, a powerful and never-ending flow that transforms everything in its path. We've unpacked 3 key truths about justice: that it's rooted in God's love, that it requires more than religious rituals, and that it's meant to be a way of life. Together, these truths invite us to see justice not as an obligation, but as an opportunity to reflect God's heart in the world around us. Justice, at its core, begins with love, the unwavering, unconditional love of God. When we see justice through this lens, it's no longer about fairness. It's about reflecting the love that God has poured out on us. It's about embodying His character in how we treat others, especially the vulnerable and marginalized. As we let this love shape our perspective, justice becomes an act of worship, an extension of our devotion to Him. But as Amos reminds us, justice isn't something we can reduce to rituals or performances. God desires more than surface-level religion. He calls us to live authentically, allowing our faith to overflow into every interaction, every decision, and every relationship. Justice is worship in action, choosing compassion over indifference, fairness over favoritism, and humility over self-interest. And finally, justice is not a one-time event. It's a way of life. It's how we live in the small, everyday moments that make up our stories. It's standing up for what's right, even when it's inconvenient. It's showing kindness to the overlooked and speaking truth to power. Justice isn't separate from the fabric of our lives. It's woven into who we are as followers of Christ. As we think about the river of justice, let's also remember the words of Fannie Lou Hamer: nobody's free until everybody's free. Justice isn't complete until it reaches everyone. Whether it's in our neighborhoods, our workplaces, or our churches, we're part of a long and powerful legacy of those who've chosen to let justice flow. Every act of love, fairness, and righteousness adds to this mighty river, keeping it alive for generations to come. The river of justice that carried our ancestors through slavery, through segregation, through civil rights battles, it's still flowing today. And like those who came before us, we have a choice. Will we stand on the shore, or will we step into the stream, letting justice roll through our words and actions? Through lenses of love, we see justice not as a duty, but as an invitation. When we align our hearts with God's, we see the world differently. Justice becomes possible because His love empowers us, and it becomes personal because we're compelled to act. So let's not just talk about justice, let's live it. Let's let it roll through our lives, bringing healing, hope, and transformation to the world around us. Let justice roll, let love lead, and let's step into the river together.